Black Swan got some massive buffs, so firstly let's go over what changed. Instead of 72% damage boost based on her effective rate for herself, it is now a team-wide damage boost, just like Kafka's attack percent trace, a strong but simple change. Every attack from Black Swan now has a 65% chance of inflicting 5 stacks of Arcana rather than based on the number of debuffs the enemy has and only on her skill. All of Black Swan's attacks have a 100% base chance to inflict the defense reduction equal to the one from her skill. Her ultimate's vulnerability can now also apply outside of enemy's turns, and there is a fixed 50% chance to inflict another stack of Arcana for every 1 stack inflicted when her ultimate is active. This is actually part of her old E6, and because there is a much higher uptime on both the vulnerability and defense reduction, the damage that Black Swan can put out and the team as a whole will deal more damage even if the actual value of the debuff is unchanged. And now for probably the biggest change in Black Swan's kit, Black Swan now inflicts 1 stack of Arcana per instance of DOT. Let's say you have 6 DOTs, 1 from Black Swan, 1 from Kafka, and 4 from Hydolons. If Kafka procs a DOT with her follow-up attack, you instantly get 6 Arcana. But because of Hydolons' zone, which also deals physical DOT based on the number of DOTs detonated, Hydolons further deals physical DOT, which means in total, the enemy immediately receives 12 Arcana stacks from just 1 detonation. It doesn't sound like much, but because previously you could at most stack 3 Arcana stacks from 1 detonation, we now quadruple the number, and better yet, Arcana stacks no longer reset to 1, but are instead half, which means we can stack Arcana much faster now, and hence Arcana stacks can now also exceed the maximum of 50, but the excess is removed after dealing damage. The cherry or cherries on top is that Arcana will always ignore 20% defense now, even outside of the enemy's turns, and deals damage to adjacent enemies regardless of the number of Arcana stacks, but this still only applies on the enemy's turns. So quick recap. We stack Arcana a bajillion times faster, and if we happen to exceed 50 stacks, that can happen a lot, it still calculates the damage. Black Swan has much higher uptime on 20% DOT defense ignore, 20.8% defense reduction from all her abilities, and 25% vulnerability from her ultimate, and she also provides 72% damage for all allies, not just herself. As a result, Black Swan during her ultimate can permanently keep Arcana at 50 plus stacks, sometimes even going up to 60. You combine this with the higher uptime from the buffs, and the damage the DOT team can do as a whole is actually, unironically, really insane. The DOT team gains almost 100% increase in total damage. There are of course some other things that add to it, like the addition of Dunhing PT, but still, the team does 80 plus thousand damage per action value at 3 targets, man. It's almost competitive with the full Remembrance team. Okay, but there are some assumptions that are different from the full Remembrance team. This DOT calculation doesn't fully account for bosses dispelling debuffs and stuff like that, which means you have to normally restack Arcana again, or you can lose the 25% vulnerability from Black Swan's ultimate. But even if you drop the team by 10 to 20,000 DPEV, which is a lot, it is still very competitive with the top tier meta teams we have right now in terms of raw damage. The keyword is in terms of raw damage, because DOT still has some problems that hold them back. Like I said, one big issue is that debuffs can be dispelled by bosses when changing phases. And because Black Swan has very awkward energy regen, I find it very hard to use Black Swan's ultimate twice in a short amount of time. Like, it's pretty much impossible without extra energy regen. This means you will always get less Arcana stacks at some point in the stage or battle, and you also lose 25% vulnerability for that section. The other issue is that DOT doesn't do toughness damage at all, so they feel a lot worse to play in Apocalyptic Shadow. This is why when they want DOT to do good in Apocalyptic Shadow, they have to add buffs like, oh, when the enemy has X number of DOTs, you can deal 50% more toughness and so on and so on. I'm going to be a bit harsh here. I don't think DOT being bad in Apocalyptic Shadow is their fault, but rather the devs not thinking through Apocalyptic Shadow mechanics enough. The concept honestly just kinda sucks. Like, I literally deal more actual damage to Kafka than I reduce toughness in this stage. And Apocalyptic Shadow bosses have damage reduction when they're not broken, right? Like, dude, it shouldn't be this hard just to break the boss toughness, man. As a result, you just clear slower in these stages for no reason. Yeah, amazing. But if you are able to ignore that, DOT really does do a ton of damage. Honestly, most of the stages available on the creator server right now aren't the best for DOT, but I could still one-cycle both sides of Memory of Chaos 12 with a sustain, and both bosses aren't really a good matchup for DOT as well. In Apocalyptic Shadow, that I kind of flamed. I did still manage to score 3600 to 3700, almost 3.8, without much optimization, so I'm fairly certain it can still do better, but at the same time both stages have the DOT buffs, so maybe my standards are kinda high, but I'm pretty sure I could score the same or higher with other teams more easily, so I'm not very satisfied with the performance here. In Pure Fiction, even if Black Swan ramps up slower and her debuff uptime kinda sucks, Tutorial Eagle Kafka completely carries, so I still got a very easy 40k score without really using my brain at all. So what these results are telling me is that despite DOT's flaws and weird mechanics, they are still heavily overperforming in terms of damage, which lines up with my calculations. They just deal so much damage that they can brute force most stages right now. Overall, I am quite happy with the changes, even though I sound a bit frustrated talking about their issues that they have. It's just kind of annoying that some mechanics just hold DOT back for no reason, but I think Black Swan is just the best Novaflare buff by far, and you can't really dispute it at all, it's just fact. I just wish there could be some kind of energy regen in her kit, and then it would be a perfect 10 out of 10 for me already. So now for Black Swan's updated builds and teams. Firstly, Kafka should be running Lushaka. Black Swan does a huge portion of DOT's damage now, so more damage for Black Swan does outweigh the extra damage for Kafka herself. Secondly, Black Swan should actually swap her signature light cone with Hydance if you have them both. With her signature, Black Swan easily overcaps on defense reduction. The maximum the game can calculate is 100%, so going over that is just useless. And when you swap light cones with Hydance, both of them will have roughly 80% defense reduction, and no one is overcapping on defense anymore. So even though Black Swan should normally deal more damage than Hydance, she actually loses less damage going from her signature to Hydance because the extra defense reduction that she loses literally just isn't there to begin with. Hence, the increase in damage from Hydance actually outweighs the loss of damage from Black Swan, making it very slightly better at about a 1% difference. Therefore, for Black Swan's light cones, Hydance signature is best scored, assuming Hydance can use Black Swan's signature, followed by her own signature, Reforged Remembrance, Those Many Springs, Goodnight and Sleepwell S5, Holiday Terme S3, Eyes of the Prey S5, and finally Showtime S5. The best free-to-play alternative is still Eyes of the Prey, and it loses about 10% damage, but just remember at 80 plus 1000 DPEV, 10% damage loss is still quite a lot. This could easily be 20 to 30% damage loss for other teams. For relic stats, it's still the same, but for main stats, it's effect hit rate or attack body, attack or speed boots, wind damage orb, and attack roll. It's actually quite similar to Hysidon's build because if the light cone you're using has effect hit rate, you can actually run attack percent body on Black Swan and still hit the 120% effect hit rate. And because you stack so much Arcana so quickly now, even without Black Swan taking a turn, attack boots is a lot more viable. Kafka and Hydance will do the heavy lifting there, and then Black Swan can just sit back with her attack boots and deal damage automatically. However, the issue with this is that in longer fights, Black Swan, like I said, will take longer to get her second ultimate. In such a case so far, what I've been doing is that I just save the first ultimate for the second part of the fight. Alternatively, you can just run speed boots. Unfortunately, even with speed boots, it can take a while to get her second ultimate, hence why for Memory of Chaos, I still usually prefer attack boots, especially since DOT does so much damage now. But for the other game modes, I would say speed boots are still very viable, like for Pure Fiction or Anomaly Arbitration. For the updated teams, it's always triple DOT now. Her team-wide damage boost is sort of hinting at it, because it allows us to run triple DOT without losing too much amplification from Harmony supports. I don't really like Cyrene, which is why I never really calculated her even during her release, and I think she's only really viable at E2, because you must run Kafka, and especially with Black Swan in the picture now, you only have Hydance as a Chryso Heir. The synergy just kinda sucks, and then you have to run Sustainers. Chances are your team dies before Cyrene even gets her ultimate if you don't have her E2. Robin's a lot less useful now, because Kafka gives 100% attack and Black Swan now also gives a team-wide damage boost, both being big portions of Robin's buff. The only thing good going for her is the 100% action advance, and that's kinda it. Runmei is also less useful since it's damage boost, but the rest spend can be useful, but she doesn't have the 100% action advance that Robin has. The last support I would consider is maybe Tribi, but again, usually will be for sustainers runs like for Pure Fiction or whatever. Since Black Swan doesn't always need to use her skill just to apply defense reduction anymore, Ho is easier to play now, and the energy regen can be quite useful, but I still prefer skill point positive sustains like Gallagher and Dunham PT, so I can spam Kafka's skill comfortably, especially since they are very free to play friendly. For Eidolons, like I said, the biggest issue with Black Swan's kit is her second ultimate and the ramp up when changing phases or waves, because enemies can dispel debuffs or they enter the wave without any debuff. It is clear the devs also know this, which is why some of her Eidolons address this. Firstly, her new E2 immediately inflicts 30 stacks of Arcana when enemies enter the battle. This makes Black Swan ramp up much faster, like I said, even in Pure Fiction, when the entire wave refreshes, or against bosses like Ligers who can spawn 4 extra enemies. A new E4 has 20% extra vulnerability, and also regenerates 8 energy at the start of every turn, or when enemies are defeated. Previously, it was limited to 1 per ultimate for each enemy, but now it's unlimited. This addresses the awkward second ultimate Black Swan has, without having to run energy regen rope, once again addressing her ramp up when phases or waves change. Finally, E6 increases the limit of Arcana by 30, so it's now 80, and instead of a 50% chance to inflict 1 Arcana for every Arcana already inflicted, it's now a fixed 100% chance. So basically all Arcana stacks double. When you enter the battle, enemies will already have 60 to 70 stacks, and during Black Swan's ultimate you can easily go up to 100 plus stacks. Because E2 and E4 are much more focused on the ramp up, it doesn't show that big of a difference here. You would need a very long simulation to really show the difference, but again is very useful for bosses like Ligers, Flame Reaver, or in Pure Fiction, because it directly addresses the other weaknesses in her buffed base kit. E1 and E6 are still really strong mathematically, because Respan is a very valuable stat that is missing from the DOT team, while E6 straight up doubles your Arcana stacks. For most players, I think stopping at E1 is already very strong, but if you are really into the DOT team and you want to play them everywhere and brute force any stage, E2 is also very good, and obviously if you have the money or you have the pulls, E4 is good, but I would probably stop at E2 myself. And that's pretty much it for my buffed Black Swan guide. I'm still trying to optimize some runs, so I might upload a showcase later, but for now, thanks for watching and see you.